In the heart of Scotland, where ancient lands whisper tales of the past, a timeless tradition endures, an art form born from the very essence of this land. Scotland's culture is woven from the threads of history, where nature's purity and human ingenuity come together in perfect harmony. Amidst the rolling highlands and serene lochs, the craft of whiskey making has been perfected over centuries, handed down through generations with unwavering pride. More than just a drink, whiskey is the spirit of Scotland, a reflection of its rugged landscapes, its resilient people, and their enduring commitment to excellence. Each bottle tells a story, aged to perfection in oak casks, shaped by time, tradition, and the hands of master craftsmen. This is the journey of Scottish whisky, an exploration of a culture aged to excellence. Hidden in a secluded location in the Hosh, Crieff, deep in the Perthshire countryside, flanked by high hills and perched on the bank of River Turret, sits the Glenturret Distillery. Steam rising from the still gives the distillery a sacred, magical air. It is a place unfettered by technology, fads, or impatience here. Time-worn experience is highly valued, and respect for the craft of whiskey making by hand and heart practiced and preached.
The company moved into new ownership in 2019-2020. There was an obvious need for a brand ambassador to grow the brand on a more global stage. So I'd been doing some of the ambassadorial elements of the job somewhat unofficially prior to that. And when the position came up for global brand ambassador, I took the chance to apply for that role. And you know what they say, the rest is history, really. So I think, as being Scotland's oldest working distillery, history and heritage is very much built into everything that we do as a brand. Particularly, I enjoy the fact that we were able to uncover an awful lot more about our history in the past few years. In particular, we now know the founding family of the distillery, if you like, and that really brings it to life, both for the team that work here and the visitors who come and visit us. So we know that we were founded by the Murray clan, or the Murray family, in 1763, and it's great to be able to actually picture what that would have been like, you know, based on historical primary source documents, etc.
Since 1763, the Glenturret, Scotland's oldest working distillery, has proudly stood at the heart of Scotland's rich and fertile whisky country. 1763, the first record, a thorough distillery rental document of Sir Patrick Murray of Ochterary, gives us confidence to state that the Glenturret is Scotland's oldest working distillery. 1814 new owners, the Murray family sold Thurot Distillery to Thomas Macinnes, who renamed it the Hosh Distillery. 1825 the Ochterary Agreement. Securing the Ochterary Agreement granted the distillery explicit permission to use both water from Loch Turret and peat from the riverbank. 1853 the Hosh comes to London. The Morning Advertiser announced the arrival of the celebrated Hosh Scotch malt whisky for London society coffee rooms and parlours. 1890 the Mitchell brothers, David and William Mitchell, were Scots-born whisky merchants with global ambitions. Soon this famed family of distillers was exporting globally. 1923 the Glenturret falls silent. High-duty rates, alcohol prohibition in the USA, and growing support for the temperance movement saw production at the Glenturret stop. 1957 bringing back the magic, visionary James Fairley purchased the Glenturret Distillery with the ambition to preserve the traditional methods of distilling whisky. 1980 the Glenturret opens its doors. In 1980, James Fairley established a distillery visitor centre, one of the first in Scotland. 2014 a right royal visit. The then Duke and Duchess of Cambridge visited the distillery during an official tour of Scotland. William and Kate enjoyed a dram and hand-filled a bottle, which is now stored at the distillery. 2019 new owners. In March 2019, the Glenturret Distillery was purchased by a joint venture led by Lalique Group. 2020 a defining moment, with a completely new range crafted by the highly respected whiskey maker Bob Dalgarno. The award-winning 2020 maiden release was launched. 2022 launch of the 50 years old, the Glenturret's first ever 50 years old decanter, one of 150 sold for PS £63,000 at Sotheby's Whisky in Lalique auction.
Process. So it's about bringing people along on the journey and almost trying to get them to fit in our shoes, to understand that what we're doing here is really something quite rare. In many ways that way of producing single malt whiskey is long gone, and the fact that we're maintaining that and almost being a guardian of the distillery at the moment is hugely important to us.
Ever wondered how Scotland's iconic single malt whiskey is made? What secrets lie in the barley, the pure Highland water, and the copper stills? How does time spent in oak casks transform a simple spirit into a complex, world-renowned whiskey? Join us as we uncover the craftsmanship behind every dram of single malt.
Hi there, I'm Ian Renwick, the distillery manager here at Glenturret Distillery in Scotland. Now we're standing in the malt store, and I'll just explain a little bit of the process and what's going on here. So the first part, we use 3 ingredients in making malt whisky. So we use malted barley, water and yeast. Make it possible for us to extract the sugars and the enzymes. This mill's been here for about 120 years. Beautiful piece of equipment. All it's going to do is going to grind down the barley and make it into grist, husk and flour. We've got husk, the bigger parts in the middle are called grits, and then the really small fine parts is obviously the flour.
At the mill store, we turn premium malted barley into whiskey by carefully milling it into husk, grist and flour. This breakdown helps extract the sugars and enzymes, setting the stage for perfect mashing and fermentation, a process refined over 120 years.
Right, we'll just go up to the mash house now. Okay, so where we are now, we're now in the mash house at Glenturret. We've taken our grist from next door. It's come up through the columns and it's now in our hopper above here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to mix it with water at different temperatures. Now the reason we're doing that is to extract as much sugar as we can and the enzymes we're going to need for converting these sugars into alcohol.
In the mash process, we mix grist with water at precise temperatures to extract sugars and preserve enzymes. This filtered liquid, called wort, is the foundation for fermentation, while the leftover grains are repurposed for cattle feed.
So here we are in the tun room. So what we're doing here is we're pumping the wort through the pipework from next door that's filtrating through the mash tun, and we're filling it directly into the washback here. Now washback is just an old Scottish name for vessel. Now as you can see, this one's nearly full. We're going to put 8,000 litres of liquid in here. Now it's going to be very concentrated in sugar. So this is where we add the third part of our ingredient, the third and final ingredient, which is yeast. Now we're going to pitch that straight over the top. You can actually see here, this is a very good example. You can see it just on the top there, just at the far side. Fermentation is basically the yeast working with the sugars, and they'll turn the sugars into alcohol by using the enzymes to assist in this.
In the tune room, wort is pumped into large vessels called washbacks. Yeast is added, sparking fermentation as sugars turn into alcohol. Over 4 days, the mix develops flavors reaching around 9% alcohol, preparing it for distillation.
Here we are in the still house. Now the wash from next door travels through the pipes into a wash charger. From there we can transfer it down into the still. In Scotland we have 2 distillations, so a wash still and a spirit still in the back here. There are 2 or 3 distilleries that distill 3 times, but we are very traditional here. We prefer to do it twice. So what will happen is it'll boil off, you'll get a vapour which will come up and hit the copper, which is very, very warm. You can feel it from here, but it's still a lot cooler than the vapour. So hit this, you'll get what you call reflux, and it'll fall back down, so it'll turn back into a liquid, and it'll keep doing that, getting stronger and stronger and more refined as it does that. Eventually it'll get up, it'll go right over the neck, into the Y pipe, into the condenser, but it'll be turned back into a liquid again. We'll collect it downstairs, as we'll see in a moment, and then at that point we've got a higher strength alcohol.
In the still room, whiskey wash is heated through a heat exchanger, capturing energy from prior distillations. This sustainable process separates alcohol from water. Copper stills purify the vapor, and after 2 distillations, the alcohol is condensed, producing whiskey at around 64% alcohol by volume, ready for aging in casks.
So we have the sample safe here. Now, as you can see, there's 2 stills running, so we've got a first distillation and a second distillation running here. Back, as you can see, this swings round, turns back. Now, we really rely on the skill of the operators here that work this. This is the last thing you get to do when you're learning to work in a distillery. All this does is it works out in density, because the density of alcohol is thinner than the density of water. So depending on the split of that alcohol and water, it has a different density, a different specific gravity. So by knowing that, we can work out the strength and then make the decisions on how we're going to actually cut this spirit.
In the spirit safe, skilled distillers monitor the flow of alcohol using hydrometers to measure density. By controlling when to cut the spirit, they ensure only the best alcohol, around 64.5% ABV, is collected for casking, preserving the quality and character of the whiskey.
So we've got our spirit, we've got our heart of the run that we've taken from the still house. Now we take it over and we put it into the cask. So the strength would have been about 71% alcohol by volume. We've just reduced that down to about 63.5% alcohol by volume, and we're going to put it into the cask. Now, nice clear liquid, really high in esters, really sweet smelling. We're going to put it into these beautiful casks. It's going to stay in there for at least 3 years before it becomes whiskey, and then after that it's called whiskey, but we're going to keep it for many, many more years before it's at the quality that we're actually going to bottle it.
After distillation, whiskey is placed in oak casks at 63.5% alcohol by volume. Over years of aging, it absorbs the wood's character, developing rich flavors and color. Only after a minimum of 3 years does it legally become whiskey, maturing further for exceptional quality.
We released a 50-year-old last year that was made in 1972. You know, there was nobody here at the distillery, but talking to some of the previous stillmen, I only had to go back 2 generations to get to the person who was actually made that whiskey. Here a long time. We've got a lot of experience in what to do there. We get a heads up quite often from the maltster to say the gelatinization temperature may be half a degree higher, things like that. So we'll put that into practice, but we also really depend on the skills of the workforce. We talked about quite often them being here for 20 years. You learn a lot in 20 years, you know, how to process things. There's very few things that will come up on production that will scare people. We've seen most of the things before, which is a really good place to be. You've only got 3 ingredients in your product. They're all very important, as you can imagine. So the malted barley, we spend a lot of time selecting farmers that will grow what we actually want them to grow for us. We also give them specifications about what they can grow. From the malted barley, it needs to go to the maltster as well. So the maltster will then malt that barley so we can actually access the sugar and the enzymes. Now that whole process we set up 2-3 years in advance of it actually coming to the distillery. Water's an interesting one because we stay in Scotland. We're lucky there's a lot of water. If you look, very good expression, today's rain is tomorrow's whiskey, and really believe that. We're lucky where we are at Glenturret, because Glenturret, we're right next to the River Turret, and there's 3 fairly big rivers all flow into that river as well. We're one of the few distilleries that have got a very good constant supply in the summertime as well. So the consistency of that water is really important, because we don't. All goes back into the river, every single drop. The water we're using for process is actually coming from the dam, which is 3.5 miles further up. Now Scotland, very soft water, very good for processing through your system. Doesn't scale up inside your inside your process either. So yeah, 3 ingredient, always important as each other.